recently got to hear in Florida. This is Peter M. from Florida. He'll be sharing his experience with the fourth and fifth steps from the AA perspective. Peter.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter, recovered alcoholic, and grateful to be alive and sober and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And thank the group for having me. Ali, it's always a pleasure to see you, brother, and thank you for inviting me onto this. I'm more excited about hearing Ralph, so I'm going to try to get the heck out of the way to kick back and listen to my buddy Ralph. But thank you for the opportunity to share. June 23rd, 1988 is when the loving God separated me from alcohol. Very grateful for this gift of sobriety. I do have a sponsor and I do have a home group. It's called Alcoholics and God in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I sponsor, oh Lord, about a dozen men right now. And because of them, I look my age. I'm only 18, but sponsees make you age quickly. I'll tell you, man, there's three places that I am most comfortable and three places I'm at my best. I can kind of let my hair down, if you will. And that is around you in Alcoholics Anonymous, when I'm in church or when I'm with my wife. It's where I'm most comfortable. And when I put those things together, I'm able to walk through wonderful times in AA gracefully because of your support and a God that backs up all of that. And I'm able to weather the storms during trying times in the past. Since the end of July has been, I shared earlier, I feel kind of untethered the last few weeks. Very powerful influence in my life. My dad passed, and it's been weird. It's been the first couple of weeks, I'm kind of just floating around and not feeling connected to anything, and not much motivation. It's been interesting, and I'm praying I'm coming out on the other side of that. And so when sponsees call, you know, a book talks about surviving certain trials and low spots ahead. When the sponsees call, or just when Ali hit me up last week, or just AA's call, just to call and talk, or getting to a meeting and fulfilling a commitment, it really keeps me buoyant and head up and shoulders square. So I couldn't be more grateful to everyone in Alcoholics Anonymous in participating in this. I did one about an hour ago. Normally I would never double book two Zooms in a row, but I was really glad to get back out here and just hang out and get to share a little bit. My job is to, in a half hour, to cover, I'm on a short leash to cover steps 4 and 5, and I'm probably going to miss a whole bunch experientially. When it comes to step 4, it's kind of like, how do I discover the truth by uncovering the lies? How do I find out who I am by finding out who I'm not? How do I discover this God that's been with me all along by discovering what God is not? My whole life was in the business of blaming people for my problems, and step 4 put an end to that. And before I get into sharing it, my experience with 4, I'll just share a quick story that really kind of encompasses a lot of the work we do. Why even do an inventory? We have people out there who are mechanics, you know, they can break down the 4th step, and that's needed, it's good, but what's the purpose of doing it, and what's the result of that? The process of recovery is not linear, like 1 year to 10 years. And it's not about becoming a great mechanic in AA, but more transformational, having an experience with that power that really kept me sober through a 4th step, and quite frankly, wrote the 4th step for me. The pen becomes a spiritual translator. And I remember many, many years ago, I just started working with my sponsor at the time, who's passed on, Mark H. out of Texas. And he told me a story about step 4. I was just about to do my second 4th step with him. And he shared a story with me about some fella he was sponsoring. And when he was hearing his 5th step, it went like this: resentment my dad caused, he was never home. And Mark said, stop. Explain what you mean by he was never home. I mean, he was never around. He's, well, no. Well, what was he doing? Well, he worked 2 jobs. And Mark stopped him and said, well, that's a different inventory. That's a completely different story. He said, did you want for anything? No. Do you have toys for Christmas? He says, yes. Was there food on the table and all the things you needed? He said, I always had that stuff. He says, I think you should look at your dad a little different. You think he really liked working 2 jobs? He says, tough enough holding down 1 job, let alone 2. Don't you think he missed seeing his children and his wife? But he was a hero to do these things to keep you okay. And Mark said with me, that guy, that resentment dissolved. See, I write an inventory based on a truth that's really a lie. It was my perceptions and conceptions on how I saw things, how I heard things, how I felt things, all through the thinking mind, which is always wrong. And what step 4 allows me to do, especially in column 4, is pull a layer back and see really what took place here. I saw that many, many times in my life. So I'm not in the business of blaming others, but getting down to causes and conditions, and is based on my point of view. I was constantly looking at life from my mess rather than looking in from a different perspective, a God perspective. And so for me, I write this inventory, and I realize as I'm writing it, how I've been living, projecting my wounds upon you and expecting you to fix it, demanding inwardly and outwardly that you make me feel okay. I know we have some Al-Anons out here. I grew up in an alcoholic household. My mom was full-blown alcoholic addict, had some psych issues, and committed suicide when I was 14. And when you grow up in that kind of environment, not to blame on my alcoholism, you lose your voice, you lose your identity. It's all about circling the wagons. What's the drunk doing? How are we going to keep her sober? And so there was a lot of resentments going on because I couldn't see my mom was sick and my dad was doing the best he could with no education on alcoholism, no education at all, quite frankly. And so I'm walking around with a barrel full of anger, hatred, prejudices, contempt, fear, sex conduct that I don't want to share anyone, and I'm expecting to not pick up another drink. In fact, I need a drink just to keep that stuff at bay. The problem is when I drink, I can't stop drinking. And so after 7 treatment centers and winding up homeless in 1988, literally a homeless bum on the street, God brings me to a place of being very teachable, being negotiable. I'm open to something. And I will tell you, it wasn't about, getting to the steps, having a spiritual awakening and becoming Moses, in 90 days. This was about survival. I don't want ever, as I did then, to be the guy who showed up in AA in 1980. I don't want to be that guy. And I certainly don't want to be that guy that was writing the first 4th step, or quite frankly, the most recent 4th step, because that guy's got resentments and fears that are driving him all the time. I don't want to be that guy. And in 1988, 89, when I was doing my first 4th step, it was survival. I don't want to live like this anymore. I'll do anything to get past it. Says, okay, we're going to do 1, 2, and 3 right into 4. In fact, when I did a 3rd step, I didn't understand the depths of step 3. I thought it had to do with strictly, I do this 3rd step so I don't drink, failing to realize my alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle of whiskey. My alcoholism sits up here in the head. And I'm operating out of the mind. I'm seeing through the mind. I'm hearing through the mind. I'm speaking through, I'm doing everything through the mind. And all that does is accumulate more resentments and more fears and more ways to escape that, which is gambling and food and sex and shopping and you name it. Trying to control what I can't control. Trying to manipulate what I can't manipulate, all to make me, King Peter, okay. And it never worked. And so I get up off my knees in step 3, and our book says, next we launched out in a course of vigorous action. God was about to take me to a place I would never volunteer to go to. And that was to uncover and discover the stuff in me, not you, for the very first time in my life, and take a good hard look at what's going on with me and taking my inventory for the very first time. This requires God because I can't do it on my own. I can study this big book till the cows come home and still unable to write a fourth step because it requires heavy lifting. I'm about to go into that dark room, the attic or that dingy basement, and flip on the lights and see what's there. I don't have the courage to do that. I don't have the endurance to do that. But God could and would if he was sought. And so I remember writing a prayer across the top of the page per my first sponsor. And it was more of a centering prayer. And it was, God, thank you for allowing me to be searching, fearless, and moral, because on my own, I'm not doing this. I'm clear. That's not just lip service. I'm clear of that today, 35 plus years later. Of myself, I am nothing. The Father doeth the works. And so I took some time after that and got quiet. And I picked up the pen and I began to create this master list of names of books as we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. They don't care if you write an inventory on tissue paper. They're really not interested. What they're interested in, am I going to be honest here? Well, here's the hook. I'm an alcoholic. I know how to be dishonest. The honesty must come from God. It required more prayer. So I write this master list of names, and it was mom and dad and so on and so forth, brothers and cousins and girlfriends, and you name it. And I went back through my life up until I can remember, till I was about 5 years old. And I took that master list and created 4 columns. And I start to uncover little by slowly the lives I was living with. And I wrote down a name in the first column. That was Mom. And I'll just share that with you. And it was really difficult for me to write this, but God pushed the pen. And I wrote down Mom, and the second column was why I'm angry with her. She was alcoholic. She never got sober. She committed suicide. Inwardly, I was crushed and angry about this. I was embarrassed to tell anyone about it. How could I be angry with my mom? She took her own life. How could I possibly be angry? But I was. I had all this plaque on the soul, and I'm trapped by it, and I can't get past it. And what I've learned, because we live life forward and understand it backwards, guys, I don't need a fire escape. I need a fire extinguisher. It's got to get put out. Because even if I run away and do the geographic, the building is still burning. That's me. I needed something to put this out. I need a new set of perceptions, conceptions about everything. I'm incapable because I'm driven by my past. How can I live now knowing how I lived then? How can I live now when I'm driven by all the voices of the past, all those experiences, all lies? And I wrote down Dad, all my resentments with my dad and my brothers and so on. And I created my first 2 columns, and they were so vital to set me up for column 3 and 4. And just to get into a little mechanics here, column 3 is really going to dictate what I write in 4. It's the 7 areas of self. And we talk about pride, the mother of all 7 deadly sins. Quite frankly, God, in a nutshell, I'm God. And expect everyone to do what I want. You honor me or you're out. I will step over you to get what I want. I'm God. Why do I need God if I'm God? And pride begets a lot of other defects of character, which are all the stumbling blocks to get me free. And I looked at my personal relationships, how I think this relationship should look. Well, mom is supposed to be, apple pie and pure and perfect and not a drunk and an addict, and certainly not commit suicide. So that was hurt, interfered, or threatened. My pride was, I come from a perfect household and everyone needs to know that. And it wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect. My dad was like a gangster. My mom was full-blown alcoholic, addict, in and out of psych wards. This is far from a normal Rockwell painting. I looked at my self-esteem, how I feel about myself, not too good through my whole life. No matter where I went, there I was. I had a lot of shame about what happened to my mom, a lot of shame growing up with my mom. You know, she wasn't at the PTA meetings and the Little League games. Why? She was in a psych ward or drunk. This poor woman was suffering. I couldn't see it. Ages 8 to 10, I was being sexually molested. That doesn't do much for self-worth. By the time I show up to my first drunk, I need a drink. And when I drank, it all went away and I wanted more. I looked at my security, and to me, this was the big one, my security, emotional security, what I need from you, what I demand from you to make me okay. I can do that nowadays. I have no right to inwardly demand or outwardly demand you make me comfortable. That's selfish and self-seeking, but we do it. I do it. I think about it. How come they're not doing this? Why is the format of the meeting this way and not the way I intended? Or you walk into a meeting ready to speak on step 5 and they say, we made a mistake, you're on 9. Well, how dare you? I had some talk ready for you. My ambition is what I want. My pocketbook is money. And sexual relations, my conduct. You know, using sex to escape, using sex for control, using sex for positive affirmation, using sex for instant gratification, using sex to make me feel better about me. I'm in pain, I go act out. It was all selfish and self-seeking, control and manipulation. It was never about love. That's a big pill to swallow, but it needed to be done. And then rubber hits the road in column 4. Because regardless, our book says we disregard the other person involved entirely. And I always like to share this story. So ages 8 to 10, I have this man who's taken me in the basement of where I used to live. And it went from him talking about women, which made me uncomfortable around 8. I was curious, but I was a little uncomfortable, to him doing things to me that he should have been put in jail for. And I'm writing this 4th step, and I'm writing this guy's name down. We'll call him Joe. Cause, all these causes, and it affects I'm writing it down. Then I get to the 4th column, and I have to disregard that person involved entirely. The inventory was mine, not theirs. Time out. And I remember getting so angry, I began to cry at the same time. Part was, I can't do this 4th step now. That means I'm going to get drunk. What is the book talking about? How could they possibly do this? And I called my sponsor. As I'm sharing this story with you, my chest is shaking sharing about it. I called my sponsor, and he said to me, how long have you hated this guy? I says, my whole life. If he showed up now, I'd probably kill him. He's just put down hate, move on. I was able to address it. And I just put down, I hate Joe, and moved on. When I got to the 5th step, my sponsor shared with me how something very similar, if not identical, happened to him around the same age, and how he was able to move through that. And I sought some outside help about that as well. But God allowed me the freedom to not only put that down, as painful as it was. If anyone says a 4th step is a walk in the park, they're not doing a 4th step. There's not an autobiography. But to write down the stuff that's been eating at me like a cancer, just eating at me, the plaque on the soul. And God put this down on paper. I wept, I got angry, but I'm free enough to share it with you today. And I can't tell you how many men have come up to me and said, you got a minute? I got to share what happened to me, and I'm embarrassed to talk about it. So God allowed me to be a little light for some other men in the fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got through all these resentments, and I went to institutions and principles, and I wrote all those down. I had a huge problem with the religious and medical community. I'm a cradle Catholic. My mom taught me how to pray and took me to all my religious commitments and obligations. But the church, and I blame the church and God and the medical community for never saving her. They failed miserably. So I tell you, I hated them both. That needs to be addressed. Even if I never have a relationship with the church or never see another doctor for the rest of my life, I'm walking around with resentment, and no resentments are acceptable. All are unacceptable. And I'm operating out of the past right now, if you will. I'm expecting to have healthy relationship now, dictated by past stuff, past events. I knew nothing about words like abandonment and betrayal. Those are words that came out of this 4 and 5 work. And my narrow-mindedness and my judgments and my being critical of other people. How dare I? I didn't know any of this. It was many aha moments. I wrote down fear, and I wrote same thing, a master list of fears, and I went through a whole bunch of fears. Some of them were ridiculous. What's behind resentment is fear. And what's behind fear is my own self-reliance. It's me trying to run the show, trying to arrange life. It's just, I fell miserably. When that noise gets loud enough, I need a drink just to shut it down over and over and over again. How can I experience God when I'm full of me and my stuff? And I got to sex conduct, and I knew I was going to have to share this in step 5, so I'd rather not write it. In fact, I remember sitting with Mark H. for a 5th step, and he says, what's the one thing you never want to talk about? Let's do that now and get it out of the way. Let's go to your sex inventory. And it was really nothing. If it has a name for it, it's already been done. And so I wrote a sex conduct inventory the first time, as much as recently as my last inventory. My last sex conduct inventory, quite frankly, there was nothing on there. I'm boring. I'm married. I mean, I'm practicing fidelity to my wife. I'm not running around. I'm not doing things I'm supposed to do. I'm very much in love with my wife. We have a wonderful life together. What's there? I remember Don Pritz sitting with me. He says, you're going to get to this work one day and find out there's not a whole lot to write. It doesn't mean you're not trying. It means you're getting better. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for God putting Marion in my life. She's been a blessing. She keeps my head up, especially the past month or two. It's been tough for me. But I had to look back at my old sex conduct, and that was about selfish and self-seeking ways, expecting no consequences from it. I had no idea what it was to be a man and to be a gentleman and to practice fidelity to God and practice fidelity in relationships. I thought a real man, those words don't apply. But they do. I just needed a design for living that works. I needed God's power to pull that off. And so I write this inventory, and over the years, there's been times where some of my inventory has a lot of names and some of it has less names. It really depends on what God's about to feed me. I know my cutoff is usually around 50 names per a sponsor, and what I do with men. After that, just becomes very redundant. We need power. Lack of power is our dilemma. So we got to move quick. I remember going to do a 5th step. Our book says a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator, a more awakened one, a clearer one, a more enlightened one, a more bonded one, where I have total trust and dependence upon God rather than the human power starting with me. But the first time I did a 5th step with my first sponsor, up until that point, this man walked on water. He was the guru of AA, but I had to take my 4th step to his house and share all this stuff. And suddenly I start to question, like, who is this guy and why am I doing this? But God woke me up enough to drop to my knees and ask God for the strength to get to his house, and I did. And I walked in, and he had some candles burning, and the lights were dimly lit. And I said, oh no, what I get myself into? And we prayed. I'll never forget this. We prayed. When I sat with all my sponsors, we pray, because they're about to be used as a channel to hear and to navigate me through this stuff. Because the big book says, if we're on a life and death errand, and God's entrusted that work to us, this is unbelievable. And it really makes no sense. that if I skip this vital step, I may not overcome drinking. God says, get one drunk and work with another drunk. It doesn't make any sense, but it works. And so I sat with my sponsor and I began to read. And we had a habit of just reading what we wrote, not to elaborate and go on and on about this. So I read resentment, cause, effects, where I'm at fault, on to the next one. And my sponsor would give me feedback, sometimes share some personal experiences that he had. I have 5 minutes, so I'll share this story with you and I'll get out of your hair. I am a regular attendee when I'm not on the road of my church. In fact, I serve there. I have a commitment there. And it's currently Sunday nights at 6 o'clock. I'm in there unless I'm on the road. It is, what's the word I'm looking for? Incredibly important that I'm involved in my religious community. It has that much importance to me, along with AA. But there was a time, I was never an atheist, but I really was angry. I was angry with the church over a lot of things. I got caught up in a lot of headlines and find fault with them, and using it as wholesale condemnation against the entire church, which is ridiculous. Would be like one person going to one meeting and getting drunk and say, hey, it doesn't work. We'd all be up in arms. Well, I'm doing a fourth step and I write down in institutions, resentment Catholic Church, and all my causes, and justified everyone. And I'm sitting in the fifth step with the sponsor at the time. And I get there and I read resentment Catholic Church, cause, third column, fourth column. He said, stop, back up. How long have you been nursing that grudge for? And I push back with my Rolodex of reasons why the Catholic Church is wrong. And he says, do you go to AA meetings? I said, yes. Is every AA meeting a good meeting? I said, no. Have people gotten chips and coins at an AA meeting when you know they were loaded? Yes. Are there 13 steppers in AA? I says, yes. You keep going back. I says, yes. You practice love, tolerance, acceptance, and forgiveness, and you work on the solution. I said, yes. He's, how come you can't do that with your church? And I had no pushback. He was dead on. And I'm not trying to bring an outside issue into this, folks. It's just a story to illustrate the value of doing 4 through 9 is you need to make amends. I said, the whole church is no. You're going to go sit with the priest and share with him when we're done with 6 and 7. And I walked into something called confession. I sat with the priest and I told him, here's why I'm here. I've had all these feelings. I've gossiped and slandered, and I'll never forget what he did. He says, I understand. And he talked to me for a couple of minutes. And I said to him, I'm here to make amends as a member of AA. What can I do to make it right? And he said, can you come to Mass tomorrow morning? I said, I'll be here. I've been going ever since. The fist of Gulliver reached down and ripped out the last of the poison. There's problems with any institution. And that's all I could focus on. I couldn't focus on the purpose and direction it gave to so many, including me, like Alcoholics Anonymous. I got free in 4 and 5. And I like the effect produced by freedom. So I'm one of those guys who go through the steps once a year, as I do with the men I sponsor. I could talk more about mechanics, but for me, it's about experientially what it did for me, what it looked like. As my current sponsor says, we'll have a conversation about this. And if you want me to sponsor you, well, I'll break the book down. And so I think I'm out of time. I want to thank you so much for having me. Ali, I love you, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. I do want to say real quickly, thank you so much to the group of folks who have put this together. I'm really grateful to be here, and thank you to the co-host and Peter. Thank you so much for that. That was incredible. This is the first time I've gotten to see you speak, and it was a gift. So thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley B. from Florida, and I am a very grateful member of Al-Anon. And as I was hearing people introduce themselves, the co-hosts, at the very beginning of this meeting, the folks from Al-Anon were saying, grateful member of Al-Anon, grateful member of Al-Anon. And you will hear that in most Al-Anon meetings. And it reminded me when I first came into the rooms how much I hated them. Like, I had resentments about people who were being grateful. how can you be grateful for something? You were forced into this, right? We walked into these rooms because I walked into these rooms because I was out of options. And I was searching for other solutions to what I thought my problem was. So how in the world can you be grateful living in that kind of circumstance? And now I'm excited to say, through the work of these steps and trying to practice them every day in my life, I can say that I'm grateful for Al-Anon. And because of that, I am grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, because if it wasn't for AA, there would be no Al-Anon. And my life has considerably changed because of these 12 steps. So I am eternally grateful. And even if I was given the opportunity, I would not change my experience up until now. So I'm very grateful, member of Al-Anon, grateful to be here. Step 4 and 5. I had a different experience than most, than some, I guess. For me, a lot of people say that step 4 was their freedom. And really, for me, step 4 was my awakening to myself. Step 4 gave me some relief. But I didn't really, truly start experiencing freedom until I got to step 8 and 9. But you can't get to step 8 and 9 unless you have done, like Peter said, some really hard, deep work in step 4 and 5. That has to come first. In step 4, for me, I was 36 when I first worked step 4. And for the first time in my life, and I'm dead serious sharing this with you all, I realized I was my problem. Seriously, at 36 years old, I realized for the first time in my life, I was the maker of my problems. And all of the reasons that I was mad and resentful and burned up and discontented and living in incessant victimhood is because of me. And my step 4, searching and fearless, moral inventory showed me that. When I started step 4, I actually was excited. To me, it wasn't daunting because I went into it thinking, I get to dump all this crap on someone. Now I get to tell somebody all the things that were done wrong to me, how I'm the victim, and how everything that's wrong in my life is because of what other people have done to me. So I walked into step 4 kind of pumped. I get to tell somebody all about it now. Get to write it down. And man, was I hit like a Mack truck. Hit like a Mack truck with the separation of feelings and facts. The separation of the delusions and justifications I was living under with reality. Hit by a Mack truck with the separation of the stories and the truth. And for me, that is all about step 4. When I work with other women on step 4, there is an intensive inventory sheet where we look at resentments and fears and sex conduct. And we talk about the causes, and we actually talk about the emotions that this drew up. But going back to what Peter said, the truth is in column 4, and column 4 is what I own in all of this. The resentment inventory for me is all about exposing the harms I have caused to someone else. And that is the gateway to my freedom. The recognitions of the harms I've caused that I carry into 6, 7, 8, and 9 with me, and I'm getting ready to admit these harms and make amends for them. That's what I'm building, and that's the foundation and the work that I'm building in step 4. My resentment and fear and sex conduct inventories is all about exposing the harms I've caused. And I try to be really careful. Early in the program, I would talk, I need to own my part. I need to be spiritually accountable for my part, my part, my part, my part. I have tried with a lot of intentionality to remove that completely from my vocabulary. Because what does my part imply? Experience with myself and my own recovery journey. When I focus on my part, that implies that a part that you are responsible for. And as long as I'm implying that, I'm not wholly focused on my harms. And that is simply what I try to focus on. Not my part. Because again, I'm implying that you have a part too. And I'm a good old Al-Anon. And I will take your inventory all day long. And I'm good at identifying your part. I can't use that excuse and saying my part is an excuse for me. So I say the harms I've caused, what I've done, and the resentment, fear, and sex conduct inventories really expose that. That is what we're trying to get at. One of my biggest resentments that I've spent lots of paper, pen, ink, and time writing on was against my mom, or what about my mom. That was one of my top resentments. I grew up in a home of alcoholism and drug addiction. Both my parents suffer from the disease, and my 2 oldest sisters also suffer from the disease. So I grew up in a lot of chaos, as most of us did. And I blamed my mom for the majority of my life for everything that happened. So on my inventory, the causes look like you always chose men over me. She was more interested in drinking and getting drunk than spending time with me. The light bill and the heat was always getting cut off. We lived off ramen noodles and macaroni and cheese in the box so that she could have money to drink. This is what my inventory looked like. And I had such a blessing. God presents us with things at a certain time for a reason. I don't think it's a mistake that I didn't do my first 4th step until I had a daughter of my own. At the time that I did my first 4th step, or 4th and 5th step, my oldest daughter was 2.5 or 3, I think. And I had just had a newborn baby, so I had a 2-month-old as well at the time. And man, I went into my 5th step ready to light my mom up with my sponsor. I just this long list of all these things I blamed my mom for. And my sponsor, thank God, she is tough as nails, and I don't think anybody else could handle me. Helped me see a different perspective. Like Peter was talking about with what happened to him with the church. What if My mom was just struggling with her disease, and her solution was alcohol. What if the reality is not that my mom was choosing men over her children, but what if it was that she was just seeking comfort and stability? What if it wasn't that she preferred to party and drink over spending quality time with me? What if the truth is she was hurting and suffering, and the only solution she knew to reach for, the only comfort she knew to reach for, was the drink? What if it wasn't that she didn't pay bills so she could drink? What if she was a single mom trying to take care of 4 girls on her own and struggling with an addiction or alcoholism? And she could barely make ends meet working 2 jobs. And the best she could do was ramen noodles and boxed macaroni and cheese. Doing my resentment inventory by myself, I don't get to see any of it. Getting honest with God and someone else, my sponsor in step 5, helps me see that different perspective. Helps me see my mother in an entirely different light. Helps me find love, compassion, and an incredible level of respect for her and the struggle. And then I wrestle with, remember, because what do resentments expose? They expose harms. Now I wrestle with this long list of harms I willingly, intentionally caused my mom. These stories and delusions I told myself about why I'm resentful with her, what I was blaming her for, that caused me to cut her out of my life for 15 years. Her 2 oldest daughters died of their alcoholism. Didn't make it. I'm her only daughter left, biological daughter left. Can you imagine? I'm sure some of you can. How freaking painful to be completely cut out of your child's life. And I purposely left her out of amazing experiences, milestones for me as a woman. Purposely left her out of it. Why? Because I wanted to hurt her. As an Al-Anon, my solution is not alcohol. My solution is control. But my favorite one, me personally, punishment. Man, I love punishing you and getting back at you for the perceived harms that I caused. I punished my mom incredibly for 12 to 15 years. And I saw none of that until I did my 5th step with my sponsor and got honest with God, myself, and someone else. And I thank God for the honest considerations I received from my sponsor. Had she not had the courage, step 4, the principle is courage. Had she not had the courage to be honest with me and share these considerations with me about my harms I caused and helped me with the perspective shift, that would have never led me into steps 6, 7, 8, and 9, where I finally made amends to my mom, and we have the best relationship I can ever remember having. I wasn't going to say incredible relationship. It's not incredible, but compared to what we always had, it's incredible. I spent 12 to 15 years cutting her out of my life and avoiding her like plague, and I miss her now. We live 2 hours away from each other, and I count down the months until she can come visit. I call her because I just want to talk to her and hear her voice. I worry about her well-being now and what's going on with her. That would have never happened without these steps, without that searching and fearless moral inventory. One of the principles in this program that helps me so much, it's step 7 principle, humility. But for me, humility, for me personally, in my experience with program, I must have humility to be able to be searching and fearless about my conduct. I have to be willing and have the humility to admit I am my problem. Without that humility, I have an insatiable need for right and wrong. And who do you think I need to prove right and who I need to prove wrong? Every time I'm right and you're wrong. Without that humility, without that willingness, I am so hyper-focused on proving you wrong, this situation wrong, justifying that I'm right, justifying my behavior, the means to an end. I get so blocked, cannot see that I'm setting the ball in motion every single time. And it is really easy to see self and others. I see some of you nodding your heads, like I can take your inventory and see your disease and I can see your resentment, fear, delusion, all of that in the snap of a finger. But I can get super lost in the story and the delusion. And for me, step 4 is not just about just doing that one time and discovering it one time. It is about a constant seeking all day, every day, about what is driving this resentment, what is driving this delusional thinking. What is it in me? What is it in me? And I believe that we can live the 4th step every day. That, technically it's the 10th step where we're searching for our disease all day, every day, but I don't think you can get really good at the 10th step every day of your life and living that. And unless you're good at doing the searching and fierce moral inventory that you get in step 4, that's the foundation, right? Those are the building blocks of helping me see my disease and my harms. And if searching for a different word, I was going to use some profanity, I apologize. If I don't do an in-depth job of that, then I am working the rest of the steps on a foundation that is very weak, very unreliable. In my experience, I hear a lot from other people, and I think our experience is different. Our spiritual experience is very different with the steps. And I hear a lot of people say that the resentments were what is blocking them from God, and that's not my experience. For me, it's the harms that I caused, that I owe amends for. That's what's blocking me from God, and that is what gave me my first taste of serenity. But again, can't get to that unless I got honest over here in step 4 and 5. Can't get to 8 and 9 and get that freedom, get that taste of serenity, true serenity. Unless back here in 4 and 5, I was searching and fearless, and I was honest with myself, God, and someone else. That takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of integrity which are the principles for step 4 and 5, courage and integrity. My pride and ego will conspire against me every single time, stop me from getting honest, to stop me from having the humility required to look at myself and what I've done. Fear and ego, pride will conspire against me to stop me from seeing it and taking the action required to get free from it. Courage, for me, I recognize courage is not the absence of fear in these situations and working these steps and getting honest with myself, God, and someone else. I think you can be courageous and actively practice the principle of courage in spite of your fear. So courage is not the absence of fear. My experience is that courage is the willingness to take action in spite of my fear being present. And I recognize the women that we work with in our sponsorship tree, we and I am sponsored by the Big Book, so much of my experience is from the Big Book. And I absolutely recognize where my fear 100% drives every single delusional thought, every single selfish act, and therefore every single harm I cause. My fears drive all of that. Like many of you, I'm sure I was also molested as a child by a very, very close member, trusted member of the family. And I was terrified to tell anyone. My dad suffered from the disease, and I knew without a doubt that he would probably go to prison for murdering this person. So I couldn't tell my dad, couldn't tell my mom because she was deep in her disease, and I feared that this would send her over the edge. Couldn't tell my sisters because they were dealing with their own abuse. I was paralyzed by fear to tell anyone. This happened between the ages of 10 and 12. Guys, the first time I ever uttered this out loud was to my sponsor during my first fifth step. And I cannot tell you the amount of relief it provided me to write that down on paper, on an inventory sheet, and to share it out loud with my sponsor. That is what I mean by courage in spite of fear. Being willing to take the action in spite of that fear being present. That experience was life-changing for me. And presently in my life, now I get to go to God. Thank you so much. I see that. With the fears that are present as a result of my life experience with that. I have 2 young daughters. And I am terrified that that's going to happen to them. So guess what? I don't trust members of the family. If I don't use these steps in that affair, remember, our job is to practice the principles in all our affairs. Deciding whether or not my daughters can go stay the night with their cousins without me being present. I have to practice the steps with that affair. If I don't, it looks like me saying no, because I'm terrified it's going to happen to them. And if I do that every time, I am robbing my children of having experiences incredible experiences that shape who they are as human beings. I will block, if I allow my fear to override my application of these principles, I will block them from having relationships with people who love them and developing into women who understand how to have loving and trusting relationships. So it's not just my life experience that depends on me practicing these principles in all of my affairs, searching and fearless, honest and admitting things, choosing to take action even though I'm fearful, courage and integrity. It doesn't just affect me now, it affects my children and the decades to come for them. So I'll end with this. I firmly believe and experience for myself that the fourth and fifth step, yes, happen the first time you work that step and the next time you actively work that step. But I have to live the principles within those steps every day, every day, every day. I don't want to continue to cause harm to myself and others. If I don't want to be blocked from God and others, I have to live those principles every day. Thank you so much. It was an honor to be here.